The Adventures of Pope Karen.
Rome, the not-too-distant future. Although the Eternal City may appear much as it has over the past 2 millennia, nothing could be further from the truth. For nearly 3/4 of a century, forces have been at work behind the Vatican walls, which have finally reached a culminating point. As she reviewed the final draft of her latest motu proprio, Pope Karen I thought back on the long journey which brought her to the pinnacle of power in the church she now ruled. Karen became an altar girl when she was in grade school. She loved processing in with the priest and being up on the altar with him. Week after week, her grandmother emphasized the importance of her vocation. Those were Grandma's exact words.
Remember, Karen, your presence on the altar is essential. You don't really have much to do up there other than handing the priest a cruet of wine when he asks, but the important thing is that you're breaking down a barrier of male chauvinism.
Grandma knew about such things. She was part of a groundbreaking folk mass group back in 1969. They swarmed the altar each and every Sunday, barely leaving room for Father to say Mass. When Karen first became an altar girl in grade school, there were many boys serving at the altar. By the time she graduated high school, there were hardly any.
Good,
her grandmother had said.
That means we're getting closer to our goal.
As Karen grew to womanhood, the synods continued year after year. Change came in tiny increments, and there were setbacks now and then, but the synod knew exactly what it wanted, and as the years rolled by, they achieved their goals one by one. The church became more and more open to new ideas, new practices, new liturgies, and new doctrines. And although church attendance continued to plummet, somehow the synodal process itself never lacked for finances. Many organizations around the world supported the work of the synod, and empty collection plates had very little impact on the bottom line. The first breakthrough came with the establishment of pseudo-deaconesses. Although they didn't have holy orders just yet, Karen and the other pioneer deaconettes were more than just souped-up adult altar girls. They were lay Eucharistic ministers, homilists, and masters of ceremony for the priests. They had power. Karen would never forget how her parish council had cheered the first day she ascended the altar, dressed in the new attire designed specifically for this new office, or how the congregation had cheered, applauding wildly after she preached her first sermon. The brilliant and charismatic Pope Francis II continued the work of his predecessor. His determination and vigor stoked the flames of progress, and change came more and more quickly. First came a motu proprio making women full deacons. That was low-hanging fruit. After years of deaconettes and synods, the people were ready. Few more synods, another motu proprio or two. And then the time was finally right. And so it was that under the pontificate of Francis II, the first female priest was ordained. Although the seminaries had been nearly empty for years, they now filled with eager women ready to take their rightful place behind the altar. And Karen was among them. Oh, what exciting days those had been. There had been blowback, of course, ugly accusations of heresy, misogynistic condemnations, the schism, excommunications. But what choice did Francis II have? Through it all, Karen and her fellow pioneers had progressed up through the ranks. The realization of the dream did, of course, not satisfy those hungering for change. It only increased their demands for more and more change, more and more progress. The most promising priestesses were identified, and their careers accelerated. Less than 6 years after the first priestess came the first female bishop. At long last, after centuries of rigid backwardism, the Church was now finally taking its rightful place in the modern world. And the modern world responded with enthusiasm. One day, Beijing called with the name of a bishop they believed would make a very fine cardinal. The candidate would be useful to the party, which was the primary consideration, but also useful to Rome. Rome agreed wholeheartedly. And so, a few short months later, Karen got her red hat as well. Although his reign had been every bit as controversial as that of his namesake predecessor, Francis II left this world peacefully. A new papal conclave convened. Deliberations went on throughout the night until finally, the long path which had begun as the spirit of Vatican II and had snaked its way through innumerable synods and motu proprios had, at long last, reached its culmination. Rome had a new pope, a female pope. As she gave her first papal blessing, the entire world seemed to stand still. Everyone knew that history had been made and that there would be no going back. Many expected her to take the name Francine in honor of her predecessors, but I shall be called Pope Karen. Women are free to retain their own names after marriage. Why should my new life circumstances be any different? Her first motu proprio instructed the faithful to address her as Holy Parent, a gender-neutral term suitable for addressing both male and female pontiffs. The pontificate of Pope Karen I was a whirlwind of action. Her activities went far beyond mere synods. She was a regular speaker at the United Nations. She became co-chair of the World Economic Forum, and the main thoroughfare in Davos was renamed in her honor. Inspired by Pope Karen's stance on environmental issues, Greta Thunberg became a nun. Then, one day, why the grim looks? Something wrong?
Yes, Holy Parent, there's, something, amiss.
It's the traditionalist, I'm afraid.
They're at it again.
Young men by the thousands were swelling the ranks of traditional seminaries. Traditional convents were full of young women taking the veil. Churches, which still offered the ancient Mass, were filled to capacity.
Wait,
Pope Karen stammered.
what? How?
Despite years of progressive reforms, dozens of synods, and scores of motu proprios, traditional Catholicism lived on.
They cite Pius V's authority. They say the old Mass.
They administer all of the sacraments according to the bygone ways, and their numbers grow. She had heard enough. She was not about to let the work of a lifetime be undone by a mob of renegade backwardist schismatics. 5 years earlier, she had signed a secret motu proprio. Only a handful of trusted cardinals knew of its existence.
Enough of this rigidity! Enough of this reactionary nonsense! The time has come, she shouted. Activate Progressionis Custodes!
It was time to set that motu proprio in motion.
But, Your Holiness, Progressionis Custodes is a last-ditch effort meant only for the most extreme of emergencies. Activating that motu proprio will unleash forces that not even you may be able to control. I said, do it!
Say, Holy Parent, as you wish. St. Gallen, Switzerland. An unearthly, blood-curdling, guttural roar echoes through the darkened streets of the infamous Alpine town. The door, leading from a secret biolab, stands ajar. Something is coming. Transfixed by the hideous sound, frightened villagers stare in terror, fear anchoring them to the cobblestones. It's getting closer. Sniffing the air, the beast picks up the scent and begins moving to the southeast, slouching towards Rome. Freed at last, the ape of the church begins its rampage. Pope Karen, what have you done? Will the ape of the church triumph? Will Pope Karen's deadly motu proprio destroy tradition once and for all? Is anyone even watching this video at the 11-minute mark? And that's a really big ape. Does the Vatican grocery store even have enough bananas to keep it under control? Just saying. Stay tuned for the next exciting edition of The Adventures of Pope Karen, a Hank Gidgeter production.